Alright, before I get started, I should probably mention that, as far as Jigsaw goes, I do plan on seeing it in the next probably few days. And the idea is that it's gonna basically be like a horror-themed thing, because it is like past 3 o'clock in the morning, and I just got back from the drive-in seeing Happy Death Day. So, it's gonna be like Jigsaw and Happy Death Day, and a couple of weeks back I saw the Flatliners remake, and a bunch of other stuff that's going to kind of be all in one video by itself, hopefully before the month is over. So, they just put, like, Jeepers Creepers 3 is going to be being shown, so there's that. But, so in the meantime, I was just going to throw these couple out here that I saw this past week. And we're going to start with Suburbicon, Clooney's new movie that was very intriguing from the start, because you see that it stars Matt Damon, Julianne Moore, and Oscar Isaac, and it is directed by Clooney and co-written by the Coen brothers. Just a winning combination all over, you'd think. And then as it started to come out, the reception apparently was not very good at all. Like, apparently of this weekend, Jigsaw had a better reception, critically. So, I started to get a little concerned, and because we do know that Clooney has his misses as a director. We're mainly looking at The Monuments Men, and Leatherheads wasn't all that great. But obviously Clooney has some very high, his highs are much higher than his lows have been. I don't think he's never made an absolute shit movie, and I still don't think he has with this, but there's certainly discussion points to be had. But to start off with, it's clearly set up, like we have the opening when they're flipping through a book and we're getting introduced through this very kind of old-fashioned 50s narrator that's kind of setting the scene for us. And it sets up to be this very, like, Stepford Wives kind of neighborhood. And then it's kind of like, as it goes on, it almost seems more like it's like Clooney trying to do Pleasantville, only without the satire and the layers. But before we go into that, it's worth noting that you probably already know this, but in the event that you don't, because Clooney has explained it many times, the reason that Clooney and Grant Heslov, his partner in crime for most of his behind-the-camera career, who you might also remember from True Lies, they actually, the reason this movie's main criticism has been its weird tone is the fact that it's not like Clooney, Grant Heslov, and the Coen brothers got together and wrote one script. The Coen brothers had already written a script back in, like, the 80s that they just never made, where the title comes from, and their portion of the script was the black family that moves into town and the uproar that causes. And it was Clooney and Grant Heslov that brought in the kind of crime thing that's on Damon's side here. And as you'll see, obviously, it's more like the black family is less of a plot point and more like the backdrop for the town. And they do serve a purpose. For the most part, though, it is like, you can kind of see why the Coen brothers didn't really go forth. Like, it's like, well, we've got this blood simple script, let's do that instead. It's, because, you know, I get what they're doing, for sure. Like, it's pretty obvious, but the thing here is that it is very much a one-joke idea. The whole idea of this beginning where we see no matter what bad shit is happening in the neighborhood, just, like, really kind of underneath the surface, nobody's gonna see it, and it's not gonna matter because everybody in the neighborhood is just focused on this black family. Like, they just sit outside their house and just make noise and, like, taunt them, and that's all they do. And they don't, because they're doing this, putting all their focus on this normal family that's just trying to live their life, they're not seeing the horrible shit that's happening. And naturally, when they do finally start to lay eyes and ears on the horrible shit, they're gonna blame the black people, of course. And it basically takes the whole movie to say that about them. And their build up, like we see, they have their own individual scenes, and it's kind of like they're basically the stars of another movie that is only a small fraction of this one. And it's a little weird, it's a little uneven, but it does have its certain tie-ins, particularly with the character of Damon's kid, where it's kind of like, when we do kind of start to follow him and how he's reacting to the other events, there's this kind of side plot going on where we realize that with what's going on with Damon here, this kid is like totally out of his element, and this kid's like way in over his head, and this is just kind of not he's just very out of place in this environment. And that kind of is added to the fact that he's the only one that takes the time to get to know somebody from the family. He gets to know the black kid and just kind of is normal friends with him. They pass a baseball back and forth, and he gives them the time of day, and the race is just not, that just doesn't register that it's necessarily different, at least in a big way. So it kind of furthers the kid's story here as well, as regards to just how out of place he is in the world that Damon has kind of put him in. But yeah, apart from that, that's about it. So, and the rest of the movie is this crime movie starring Matt Damon and Julianne Moore, more or less. And I think the problem here is that when you look at the crime stuff, when you look at the stuff that Clooney put into it, it's like, and we know Clooney's very familiar with the Coen Brothers material, with A Brother Art Thou and Tolerable Cruelty, and the movie I really thought this was going to draw inspiration from the most, Burn After Reading, which you can kind of see that, but maybe not in the not in the way you would hope. And the thing there here, though, is that you can tell that Clooney was trying to write a Coen Brothers movie to go along with this already existing Coen Brothers script, but the thing about it is, this wasn't really, what the Coen Brothers put into this wasn't really a typical Coen Brothers script. So it's kind of weird combining that with Clooney trying to do what would be a typical Coen Brothers script. And it's not always meshing. I don't think it's as tonally out of hand as I had been led to believe it was, unless that's just because that's where my expectations got put before going in, but still there are a lot of questions raised that probably shouldn't be. But another problem here is also take in the Alexander Desplat score as well, which I had heard decent things about, but it's kind of like, I'm not really sure, because I think it's not like it's a bad score or anything, like, by itself, but it kind of elevates the scene, like the scenes that where you can tell the tone is gonna take a shift, a very drastic one. It's like the score is less kind of elevating material and more just kind of like it's really enhancing just how off the tonal change is. Like it's a culprit in this, so I kind of was in the middle on that. Another thing here, though, is that it's really not that funny, but I don't really think that's because, I don't think that's from lack of trying. It's really hard to tell what exactly in this movie is supposed to be humorous, because it just feels so, I can't tell if it's just really, really dry, or if it's kind of a lifelessness. There's a very fine line here, because I don't remember laughing much. The only, like, maybe a couple of things here and there, and the Oscar Isaac scenes, but it was less that the Oscar Isaac scenes are funny, and more just like, I was amused that you can tell how much fun Oscar Isaac was having playing this really weaselly character. So, and that's certainly, those scenes are very good because of that. He really does bring a nice life into it right in the middle here. But then there's stuff like the jabs at religion, and it's kind of like the approach was, we'll give it the humor of the era that it's set in. Like, this is stuff that would have been funny in the 50s. So that's the kind of comedic territory we're going to go for here. But the problem is that there's a reason that kind of stuff is dated now. And that, because you put it in its era, isn't necessarily going to make it any funnier in 2017. So it's, I think that was a bit miscalculated. And not only, as far as the crime element goes, I do like the way that the story kind of unravels. Like, it did have me wondering what was going to happen next. But at the same time, it's like, I did wonder what was going to happen next, but pretty much as soon as a scene starts, you know where it's going to go. So it's like, really, you're just like, I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen at the start of the next scene. Because by the time the next scene starts, it'll be very easy to piece together where that scene goes. But there's still those moments where you kind of wonder, then where's it going to go from there? But once again, they tend to find ways to where once the next scene starts, you're pretty well aware. But one thing this did not hinder, weirdly enough, like I was talking about how there's like a dryness or maybe a bit of a lifelessness, that what's really surprising is, I don't know how other people feel, but for me, the pace in this movie is kind of outstanding. I thought it's an hour and 45 minutes. I thought it blew by. This movie does not feel it's like that. It feels a lot shorter than it is. So they did something right in that territory. So I don't know if it's because I was still, you know, even though you can start to piece together what direction things going exactly as you watch the scenes, the individual scenes play out. I still found something intriguing in it. I was certainly never bored with it. So, and that's, you could probably throw the performances in there, so I praised Oscar Isaac. Damon, unsurprisingly, is great. Obviously, Julianne Moore has a couple of parts that she does very well. She has to do, like, a drastic change with no warning with her character that's kind of off. But I think she's good enough to sell it when it happens, once you get over the fact that it is happening, because it's so jarring. But overall, I thought she did fine once that change was made. It's worth noting, when you talk about the tones, that Josh Brolin was supposed to be in this movie, and I'm really glad I found out that he wasn't when I did. I saw it today. I found out that Brolin's scenes had been cut yesterday. So I would have been really disappointed if I didn't happen to just see that one thing before I went in today. And I had read somewhere where Clooney said, like, Brolin's scenes were the funniest things that they shot. But they were so funny that they were out of line with the tone. Because that's the thing is, apparently this movie is being promoted as a comedy. And when you see it, like, on databases or whatever, the main genre listed is comedy. I think you'll have a lot better time with the tonal shifts if you go in thinking it's a serious crime movie that just happens to have some kind of offbeat humor, like, underneath. So, because, yeah, it felt very dark and very serious for a lot of the runtime. So, like I said, I don't know if that's, like, just an absence of comedy, or if it's a presence of comedy that's not landing. But I took it as a mostly serious movie that just happened to have those kind of weirdly comedic kind of things to it, like the Damon riding on the bike and shit like that. I don't know. But, yeah, but, okay, so Brolin's scenes were cut. I'm not positive, but I really think that was him in the background of that town meeting scene at the beginning. So, so if that was him, we do get a tiny little taste. He doesn't have any lines. He doesn't even really have an expression on his face, but he's there. If that's him. So, So there's that. So, yeah, I actually really want to like it, and honestly, I think I probably will like it more the more I think about it. I don't think it's going to be one of those movies where the fault, I see the faults right away, so there's really not a whole lot that's going to occur to me later, and I don't really have a lot of ill will towards it right now. But I do think that it's there's not enough that kind of redeems these moments to where it really feels like there's a lot of shortcomings in regards to how it was all presented and laid out. And the fact that there's so many questions raised about what exactly tone it is. Because like I said, saying if it really is trying to be a comedy, me saying I see it as a serious crime movie could be an insult and could be a criticism. But it is, yeah, it's just such kind of a weird movie that those lines kind of blur, and I don't think in an intentional way. I think that's the problem. So, yeah, but well, I'll see how it grows in my mind. It's something that I would watch again. So, whenever that happens, I guess I'll see where I lie. But in the meantime, I want to like it, and I feel like I'm on the cusp of liking it, but there's just something kind of holding me back from saying I don't think I can call it good yet. So, I don't know, we'll see. I do think if the reception is as bad as I'm hearing, that's overblown. It's not that bad at all. So, yeah. Okay, let's go on the opposite end of people saying negative things are completely blown out of proportion. Our second movie is going to be Brawl in Cell Block 99. What's his name? That's Craig Zoller's new movie, the guy that did Bone Tomahawk. And much like Bone Tomahawk, I heard a lot about this movie before I actually saw it, because it has a lot of scenes in it that people really want to talk about. And it stars Vince Vaughn as a former drug dealer who goes back into... Well, he doesn't go back to drug dealing, but he's making exchanges and ends up getting caught and going to prison, where he is given an ultimatum by Udo Kier, while also incurring the wrath of the warden played by Don Johnson. What I just told you in one sentence takes the movie 2 hours and 12 minutes to say. So, take that for what you will. Okay, so the first thing to note right here, right off the bat, is it's a movie that cares a lot about its characters, because it is 45 minutes in before he's on the bus being taken to prison. So, in the meantime, we have this opening when Vaughn has an intimidating look about him. He has shaved his head, he's got the cross tattoo on the back of his head, and obviously Vince Vaughn in general is just a big dude. So he's got this very imposing, very kind of threatening look about him, and he's just been fired. And his wife, Jennifer Carpenter, is cheating on him. So, big, imposing dude that he is, he's going to react to this. But it's the way that he reacts to this that's very important and shows us the kind of character that he is. Because once it's all built up and we know something violent is going to happen, his rage is very, very calculated. Like, he's very in tune with the kind of person that he is, and uses that knowledge to kind of rein himself in and make sure he deals with things the way in which he deals with them that's safe for the people around him and the people that he cares about. So there's this opening scene when his reaction is to tear Jennifer Carpenter's car apart with his bare hands. But before this, he has a nice, smooth conversation with her and says, you know, just get in the house. I'm gonna do this. And he does it, and then he goes into the house, hands still bloody, and sits on the couch and has a long conversation with her and says, you know, let's talk this through, let's try to work this out. And when she goes, you know, to like show affection, he's like, we're not gonna do that yet. I'm not there yet. So so it's like, it's a character that's been very well thought out in regards to how he handles what he does. He's not just some, you know, brute character that's going to do this mindlessly, and ultimately, if he gets himself in deep water, he's done it knowingly. So we know that going into what situations are going to arise once this guy is in prison. After this deal goes wrong. So it's here that I think this has a lot more tonal problems than Suburbicon did. And the reason for this is that there's this argument going around for this movie. After I watched it, this is one of those movies where I had time to watch it and then go see what everybody was saying in depth. Because I had heard about some of the scenes before I saw it, but I was really trying to avoid most of the stuff. And then I went in depth after I watched it. And there was a common excuse made for this movie's tonal shifts. It is, apparently Zoller was going for an exploitation vibe. So, you have these moments when he gets to the prison, and there's going to be these brutal scenes where he's, like, breaking people's arms in half, and there's, like, bones exposed. There's the dude that gets his face scraped against the ground, you can see his fucking skull. There's people get shot and their heads explode. All that stuff. And the thing about it, though, is that, and they say, you know, the violence is meant to be that way. It's on purpose. That's like, every time you give this movie a criticism, that's the response you get. Well, it's on purpose. But the thing is that, if, number one, if you think this movie is all out 150% an homage to exploitation movies, as Zoller has apparently said that it is, I imagine the people saying this have seen like one or two exploitation movies, because there are certainly exploitation like you can see those homages in here, but it's like maybe a few scenes that comes through. That's a few scenes in a movie that is 2 hours and 12 minutes. Because the violence only gets that over the top when he's in prison. And the thing about it is that there is violence before he's in prison. The dudes that get shot during the deal when he gets arrested, the violence is not the same. So it's like, okay, so maybe it's intentional to have the shift come when he's in prison. But the thing is there is like a long half hour, maybe longer, where it's just... Remember, when Alex went to prison in A Clockwork Orange, and we had the scenes where he like got strip searched, and he was taken through, he was put wherever. Imagine those scenes in A Clockwork Orange just dragged the fuck out. Just really, really dragged the fuck out. And it's like they're really trying to put us in this realistic world, like as if to say, this is what prisons are really like, and just really ground us in this realistic world. So, I don't know where the argument would be that you could say the tonal shift is intentionally between the inside and the outside of prison. And yeah, and it does, it's very mundane and very, very, the whole thing for its length is very, very, very paper thin. Because it is just Vaughn gets his ultimatum from Mudokir, and then basically the movie is him going from place to place to place just to get to one guy and do one thing. and the prisons get like crazier and crazier the more he's transferred. At one point he ends up in like some medieval prison or whatever, and like I said, the violence gets like more and more cartoonish and like supposedly homage to exploitation, looking fake and cheesy and stuff like that, but it's just like, there's no real, I don't know, we don't really ever get to a certain point that we gradually get to. It's just like the movie keeps changing its mind on what it wants to be. And I don't feel like any of this stuff was on purpose in that sense. Because when I say stuff like dragged out, like an example would be when he, and the thing is like, if you were to drag stuff out, maybe it would be, like, you imagine long scenes, like a Tarantino scene, for instance, and you think, like, the scenes are usually really long because attention is going to gradually build. And it's like, it'll seem like it's mundane for a long time, but then you slowly realize we're starting to get somewhere. Then we're really getting somewhere. Then we're really, really getting somewhere. And then the scene ends in fireworks. But this is not the kind of slow this movie is. This is stuff like, in the middle of a drug deal, Vaughn is underneath a pier, and he's gonna climb up the thing and go back over and fucking shoot people. And we watch him try like 5 times to climb up this pier because he keeps slipping. Because it's a pier, it's wet. And it's... That's how the scenes get long. It's stuff like that. And so it's like, well, it's realistic. I mean, if you tried to climb up here, of course it's going to be, you know, slippery because it's water. It's showing the realism of how this would go down. Well, okay, I thought this was supposed to be an unrealistic, cheesy exploitation movie. What do you want to be? What are you doing? What do you want to... I don't understand your identity. I don't at all. So it's like, it's really... I don't know. It's... I don't know. I just really don't understand the tone of this movie. And that's kind of the same way... I remember Bone Tomahawk's length was a problem for me, too, because it's like, I liked Bone Tomahawk. I certainly like Bone Tomahawk more than this. But at the same time, it's, that movie's, what, 2 years old now? And I haven't seen it since. And it's not that... It's not necessarily that it's worsening in my mind, it's just that... And it's not that, oh, it was so gruesome, you know, it's so hard to take. Not even that, it's just not a movie I care enough about to revisit, even though I can acknowledge the many good aspects of it. So... And yeah, I don't understand what, I know I'm harping on this, but I don't really get Zoller's fixation with these bloated runtimes. Because there was something that, I mean, I hate to say this, because it was something I was so avidly against when I saw it. It was, like, honestly, it actually sickened me when I saw it. It was, you go online, basically, if you're an aspiring screenwriter... My advice to you is to not fucking listen to anybody. Because you go online and you see, like, screenwriting tips and screenwriting 101 and stuff like that. And it's, like, people who are, like, really up their own asses and think they know everything about the craft when everybody's style is going to be different. There is no one way to go into screenwriting. But my point here is that I saw one absolute fuck that really pissed me off. And it was a guy that said he was giving tips on screenwriting, this supposed expert. And he said, any script over 90 pages is the writer wallowing in self-indulgence. Anything over 90 pages is the writer being arrogant. That's clearly not the case. I don't know what the fuck that guy's reading, but, or what movies he's seen or whatever, but, having said that, knowing how much I hate somebody saying something like that, there's something about me watching Zoller's movies at the lengths that they are, and watching specifically Brawl and Solog 99, and just watching it and just saying to myself in every single scene, why is this so long? Why are we still on this? Why have we not gotten to this? What is the focus here? Because if you're trying to set up the realism of the world, you completely go against that with the exploitation bullshit. If you're trying to set up the characters, we've set up the characters very early, and they really don't go through any particular changes throughout the movie. So, what are you doing? And you're not using it to build suspense. It is just a movie that just wants to exist for a long time for seemingly no reason. And I don't know. And I was talking about, not that this is necessarily a bad thing, because I guess you could say it's one of those things where it's building and building and building, you get the whole thing, but it's just, instead of being one scene, it's the whole fucking thing. But I was talking about the fact that there's no Geostorm in Geostorm. It's also worth noting the Brawl in Cell Block 99 is like the last 2 minutes of this 2 hour 12-minute movie. And it's hardly a brawl. When I think of, like, I imagine a lot of people are imagining, when they see the title, they're imagining like a prison riot. No. so if you haven't seen it, get that into your head now, real quick. And that's not even, I'm not even mad about that. Like, that's not even a criticism, it's just something that I feel should be known. So I don't know. I'm just not really, I just really was not into this. And which sucks, because I really wanted to be in with the big reception it's been getting. People really, really love this thing. And Vaughn was getting a lot of praise for it, and Vaughn's certainly an actor I can jump on board if he's getting praise. But, I just, well, a problem with Vaughn, too, here is, while he is very good, I think that it's one of those cases where the dialogue is so clearly trying a bit too hard to be clever. Because Vaughn has just with a lot of Vaughn's lines, like, what was that bullshit about, I'd rather, like, knit pink booties than hurt somebody for no reason. There was, at the beginning he's asked if he's okay, and he says, I'm, south of okay, north of cancer. I don't know. And then there's the stuff where it just gets really bad after a while, where it's like, and I know, I imagine this is another thing where people are going to say, but it's on purpose, exploitation, whatever the fuck. Just, please see more exploitation movies before you fucking say that. But the thing here is, the line was, it was, I think it's when he meets Mark Lucas's character, and he's says, you know, if you want to get a faggy water out of the refrigerator. And Vaughn's response is, I didn't know H2O had a sexual orientation. Are there people out there that think this is clever dialogue? I can't handle this. I don't know. I don't really like this movie. But I do understand its appeal, quite honestly. Like, I keep saying, I don't know, I don't understand, what the fuck are you? But I can, when you really look at it, like, I can get, you know, this finding an audience for sure. And so, and I didn't praise Don Johnson. I like what Don Johnson's doing here a lot. He's not in it near enough. And the thing I really liked about it too, going back to a Tarantino vibe, but even Don Johnson's played a lot of roles over many years. But with this role in particular, obviously, I was thinking about the fact that he could have very easily, with this role, have just been playing Big Daddy again. But it didn't really feel like you could see the echoes of it, but it did feel like it was a different character. So just on that alone, I commended him. But he is very fun to watch here. And like I said, I really wish he'd been in it more. That would have been, like, if we had gotten more of, like, a rivalry between him and Vaughn, that would have been a really fun and interesting direction to go, to watch them go at it, because of the characters they've created here and those battling personalities. Would have been really cool to see mesh more than fucking twice. But, yeah, there's just way too much here that doesn't fucking matter, dragging it out for no goddamn reason. And the payoff is some gore. I don't know. Posing as some exploitation love letter or whatever the fuck. I don't know. It's not for me. So, this particular movie. So, that's probably gonna piss a lot of people off. Sorry about that, but that's the way it goes. I know this is actually, people are gonna really hate me for this. I kind of somewhat defended Suburbicon, and I don't like Brawl in Cell Block 99, so this is gonna go over real fucking well, I'm sure. So, but yes, in the meantime, Versus will still be going out regularly. I'm hopefully gonna get that horror togetherness here. I've also been seeing the animated movies over time. Despicable Me, Cars 3, etc. And I was gonna probably put those on the Thor Ragnarok video, so you have all that stuff to look forward to if you are, so yes, I think we're about done here. So, yeah, that's all, so look forward to that shit, or whatever, and